today at your luncheon. I appreciate the invitation, and I see some of my smiling clients actually in the audience too. So, hello. How are you guys doing today? So today, I thought, and feel free to speak up because this is a fairly informal presentation. So if you've got questions that are burning, just raise your hand, and I'd be happy to field those questions. But I thought an interesting topic might be some of the health issues that we are seeing now associated with modern living. And the reason for this is that a lot of what I see in veterinary medicine is also happening in human medicine, and there are a lot of connections between animal health and human health. So this is my background. I'm a haiku boy. Grew up right past Five Corners. A couple of my little doggies when I was a little kid. And obviously, South Shore Veterinary Care is where I spend a lot of my time over in Kihei. And one of the things that we try to focus on is getting to the root of what is going on with your animal's physiology, as opposed to always just doing the Band-Aid type of approach, so we can problem solve proactively. I was lucky enough to author the best-selling book for veterinary cancer. It's called The Dog Cancer Survival Guide. I wrote a document called The Dog Cancer Diet. I wrote a blog called The Dog Cancer Blog. Obviously, I have an interest in dog cancer and also in human cancers and chronic disease. And there's a whole field now that is connecting human medicine with veterinary medicine, especially in the area of cancer. It's called comparative oncology. And so I started out on this journey because we see tons of cancer now in veterinary medicine. As a matter of fact, dog cancer is the #1 cause of death in dogs right now. #1 in 3 dogs will get cancer in their lifetime. And if you have a doggy who's 10 years of age or older, you'll have a 50-50 chance of experiencing dog cancer, because those are the statistics. Kitty cats, similar, second leading cause of death in kitties. So why is that? Well, I believe that a lot of what we're seeing is related to the effects of modern living, just like in human beings. And so we see a lot of these diseases of civilization in the pets that we're seeing in people, with the diabetes and the arthritis and obesity and inflammatory disorders and, of course, cancer. Next. There are major links between our dietary choices and the development of these diseases. This is not a surprise to anybody, but we're seeing the same effects in the pets that we're seeing in the people as a consequence of the food that we are eating and the food that we are feeding our pets as well. There's a big issue going on right now with the oils that are used in foods, both pet foods and in human diets. How many of you have heard of the omega-3 fatty acid group? Omega-3 fatty acids, yeah, most of us. Okay, now, not many have heard of the omega-6 fatty acids. Who's heard of the omega-6s? Okay, some of you, about 4 or 5 folks. Okay, so the deal with this, here's the story with the omega fatty acids. The omega-3s are the good ones. Those are the ones that you find in the fish oil and in krill oil and in perilla oil and certain types of algae and stuff like that. And the reason why those are good is because they decrease inflammation. And inflammation, we see now molecular inflammation, microscopic inflammation, is the kernel, the key to all of the diseases that we're seeing in modern civilization. Microscopic inflammation. When you have too much omega-6 fatty acids, different types of oils in your body, you will start to get inflammation, microscopic inflammation. You'll start to see atherosclerosis, cholesterol plaques, the joints will start to get inflamed. Alzheimer's has an inflammatory basis. Every single disease that we see as a consequence of getting older is related to inflammation. So the omega-6s are the oils that you find in what? In corn oil and in vegetable oil, right? And in usually beef fat, beef products that are farmed using corn as opposed to grass. Now, if you look at a package, how many times do you see corn oil, vegetable oil, beef products, fats? It's everywhere. So we're taking in tons of omega-6 fatty acids, not enough omega-3 fatty acids, creating microscopic inflammation. As a matter of fact, 40,000 years ago, they've done studies where they look at the old fossil sites, and they're estimating the composition of the omega-3s versus the omega-6s 40,000 years ago in the human diets and also in the pet diets of domesticated doggies. About a 1-to-1 ratio of omega-3s to omega-6 in those old diets. Guess how many we're taking in now, omega-6 in comparison to omega-3? Much closer to 10 to 1, and in some cases even 16 to 1 times. So this is a major problem, both in pets as well as in people. Next slide. So again, inflammation is the central issue with these chronic diseases. Okay, go on. If we look at body weight, this is an epidemic in the pet population. Well, you know what they say sometimes? The pets take after their owners, and many of us are carrying a few extra pounds, me included. 48% of pets are overweight or obese in this country, 48%. It's an epidemic because many times food equals love, which we all know, and the same thing happens with the pets. These are the types of things we see. And that is real. That is a real life boxer. And that's called a before and after shot. This is what happens when food equals love. Now the scary thing is this. Being overweight and obese sets us up for not only inflammation, but other things as well in the body, like cancer. And there's some recent evidence now, there's a special hormone called adiponectin. It's one of the strongest anti-cancer hormones in the body. Now the problem is that bodies that are overweight don't make enough adiponectin. Let's take a look at the next slide. Here's a study that was done on a couple of mice. The mouse on the right-hand side has a much lower level of adiponectin than the mouse on the left-hand side. Much higher cancer rates in the mouse on the right-hand side. Now, adiponectin is new. People don't know about this yet, but in the next decade, you'll be hearing more and more about adiponectin and the connection between being heavy and developing cancer later in life. This is a diagram of a pet food extruder. This is a fancy apparatus, and this is how you make commercial pet food, dry food in particular. The meal goes into the hopper, that's on your left and the far right, and then ultimately it gets pushed through something called an extruder, which is a long tube that superheats the food and pushes it out like a tube of toothpaste. It gets chopped up then into little kibbles that you guys are familiar with, dried out, sprayed with flavoring agents, and then out you have commercial pet food. Now the problems with the production of food, both in humans and in pets, is we have heating going on over 200 degrees Celsius. The heating of the food, 392 degrees Fahrenheit, is problematic. And why is that? When we get at these temperatures, the proteins in the chicken and in the beef become carcinogenic. They start to produce carcinogenic substances called the heterocyclic amines. Let's take a look at the next slide. Here's a quote from a publication. You can see that this was published in 1997, so again, this information has not quite hit the headlines, but the quote is, "The range of risk for an individual from these compounds is enormous." That means some individuals are fairly resistant, but some individuals are very, very sensitive to the carcinogenic effects of the heterocyclic amines, and the same thing is true for our pets. So what we're advocating now is lower cooking temperatures and the use of food, pet food, that's produced at lower cooking temperatures. And many of the pet food companies now are responding to this scientific information and correcting the processing of the foods. It hasn't quite penetrated into the human medical field quite yet, but it will. There are all kinds of other things that we see that are part and parcel of living in the civilized world, and I wish I had a long time to discuss each one of these, because, well, there's enough information to fill a book, and there is a book called the Dog Cancer Survival Guide. But one thing that we're seeing a lot of is melatonin deficiency. Now melatonin, how many have heard of melatonin before? Okay, so a lot of you. So that's the pill that you take for jet lag and you want to sleep, you take your melatonin. Melatonin is made in the pineal gland in the brain. And the interesting thing about melatonin is about 2 a.m. in the human circadian rhythm, late at night, we are supposed to be making a bunch of melatonin. What happens if there is light in the room where we're sleeping? Does anybody know the effect that has on the melatonin levels? It decreases, yes. And in particular, blue wavelength light. Look at the color of this screen. Does it remind you of the color of any other screens that people commonly look at during the day? Television and also computer screens, there's a lot of blue wavelength light. Blue wavelength light goes in the retina and is selective in suppressing melatonin levels in the body. Now, what's the big deal with melatonin? Well, for one, it makes you sleep good. Number two, it has potent effects in protection against various diseases of civilization. There's a study done with a bunch of nurses Some of these nurses, it's called the nurses study, half of the nurses in the study worked overnight shift. They were up at night at around 2 o'clock, and they were working because they had to work overnights. And the other group of nurses were not. They had day shifts. Guess what the cancer rates were in the group that stayed up at night? They were more than double the breast cancer risk compared to the other nurses. And they checked the urines of these hospital workers, and they found the level of melatonin was way, way, way reduced. So there's an association. The cause and effect issue has to be cleared up, but there's definitely an association between low melatonin levels and the production of cancer in the body. How about immune compromise? How many people, when work or play or whatever, stress out the body and then get sick afterwards? We've all been through this, of course. Stress is okay in small amounts. The body likes that. It actually strengthens the immune system. Short bursts of stress. Chronic stress is a whole different creature. Hormones in the body, we've heard of, some of us may have heard of cortisol. How about epinephrine and norepinephrine? Those are the fight and flight ones, right? When you're getting really kind of freaked out. Direct stimulatory effect on cancer cells, number one. And what do those substances do to the immune system? The white blood cells get suppressed. Direct effect, direct suppressive effect. But this is not if you go see a horror movie and you get excited, your immune system doesn't shut down. No, this is chronic stress, for example, CPAs in the middle of tax time, Wall Street brothers, and these types of things. And this is why we have immune compromise. And the strange thing about cancer and a lot of the disease of civilization is they involve the immune system. And they're present because we have an immune suppression that we walk around with many times because we're always stressed out, zooming around as part of modern living. So it goes back to some of the old ancient wisdom. We're seeing now scientific corroboration for ancient concepts. Go to sleep early, sleep well, try not to stress out too much, eat proper diet. It sounds like very old-fashioned advice, but the crazy thing about it is we're seeing direct genetic molecular connections between these old-fashioned ideas and cutting-edge trends in medicine and also in pharmacy therapeutics and other treatment modalities. Nutraceuticals. So what are we going to do? It's very difficult for us to leave modern society, right? Here we are. It's also very difficult for most of us to utterly change what we do. We can't have 180-degree lifestyle changes, as we've heard. It's difficult to do that. So the key, I believe the key to this is the use of what they call nutraceuticals, nutritional compounds with pharmaceutical effects. Nutraceuticals, it's a funny word. But what we're seeing is nutritional compounds are capable of turning off and turning on genes in the DNA. The field is called nutrigenomics. Nutritional compounds can literally turn on genes and turn off genes in the body that have effects on the issues that we're seeing with the immune system, the issues that we're seeing with blood sugar, the issues that we're seeing with inflammation. And that's, I think, the key to the future of prevention and also treatment for a lot of these diseases. Let's see the next slide. Apoptosis, very funny name. What is apoptosis? There's a gene in the body, multiple genes that are supposed to turn on when the cells get old and damaged and deranged, so they get cleared away. There's a cartoon of a cell undergoing apoptosis. The cell on your far right is an old, diseased, or damaged cell. The molecular switch gets turned on, it cuts itself up into little pieces, it goes away quietly. It's a healthy form of cell suicide because the cell is bad, and then it gets recycled and then used to make the way for new cells. This is a very hot area of research right now. Let's look a little bit more about apoptosis. One of the things about cancer, because those are abnormal cells, they're not committing suicide even though they're supposed to be committing suicide. Does this make sense? Does anybody not understand what I'm saying? Because it's a strange way of thinking about it. Cell suicide being good, but it's the old cells that are going away. Does that make sense? So cancer cells are immortal. They try to be immortal, so they go on and on. They lack apoptosis, and this is a multi-billion-dollar industry right now in cancer treatment. Now, there is a tumor that's a hemangiosarcoma. It's a blood vessel wall tumor that we diagnosed in a dog. We removed it surgically, wide margins, got the whole thing out, we thought. That's the regrowth. It grew back. That's what malignant cancers do, as many of us know. They send out cancer cells in a halo around where the bump is. So you take out the bump, you see it with your eye. Okay, I got it out. I got a 1-inch margin around, all clean-looking tissue. But there's still a few cells scattered here and there that you can't see. They're microscopic. That's why they grow back. What happens if you provide certain substances to the body that are capable of turning on apoptosis, cell suicide? Let's take a look. The tumor gone. It went away. So this is what they call proof of concept in science. You know, it's not going to, we don't have the cure for cancer right here, but in some dogs, if we provide those dogs with nutritional substances that are capable of turning on apoptosis genes, the tumors go away. And that's pretty remarkable. We did a proof of concept study involving 32 dogs. We had about a 40% response rate with the use of plant natural derived dietary compounds in treating cancer. Super exciting. And yeah, in conjunction with chemotherapy. Yeah, usually chemosensitizers is the application. I actually got a grant for that last year for that very thing, that very application on the human cancer field, because there's a lot of room for that. So you can use less chemo, perhaps, and less side effects. So that led to the production of EpoCaps, which is a supplement that I put together. It's a pathogen supplement. And that's been on the market now for a year or two, and it's helping a lot of dogs with cancer. It's not the cure, but it makes them feel better. It acts with chemotherapy, and it helps in some cases to shrink their tumors. Pretty profound. And then, of course, how about prevention? Remember, we have the immune compromise. Remember, we have the microscopic inflammation. We have the metabolism issues going on with our lifestyle and our diets, our melatonin. So that is the newest cool thing coming into veterinary medicine, EverPup. And it's designed to address each one of those factors in civilization that set you up for chronic disease. So we'll see how well it works in dogs. And I'm hooked up with some very knowledgeable, connected people in the human oncology field, and then we'll see how well these things work in humans after they work in dogs. Okay, excellent. So those are the websites if you want to do a little bit more research on these various things. If you want to read about some of these topics, Dog Cancer Blog, I blog regularly in the field of dog cancer. And if you'd like to give us a call over at South Shore Vet Care, vetandkihei.com. And if you're interested in the supplement stuff for your well-being, for the well-being of your pets, check out functionalnutriments.com. And that's all I have for today. Thank you. Question in the back.
What do you recommend for a holistic dog food? I lost one of my Cavaliers to, I think it was those wagon train things that Costco had. So I went to a holistic, and now I'm using Earthborn. Is that okay?
Yeah, so the question had to do with what's a good brand of food or a good type of food to feed a dog. Yeah, that's a good one. Also, Halo is good. Taste of the Wild, Blue, Honest Kitchen. These are all foods that are paying attention, they're either paying attention or starting to pay attention to food temperature preparation. Also higher protein content, because guess what? Doggies being fed starches and carbohydrates are not doing well in the exact same way that humans who are eating a lot of either processed sugars or white type starches are not doing well either. Other questions?
Does that need to be supplemented though with vegetables? Because they kept saying you needed the one that was sick, they said keep giving him more carbs.
Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, okay, so if you were to ask AFCO, which is the regulatory agency in charge of pet foods, do you need to add anything to the foods? They will say no, because all of the foods or most of the foods on the market today are balanced and complete. Those are the magical two phrases, balanced and complete. However, what we're seeing now, because of the presence and the frequency of these diseases, my feeling is that we do need to start supplementing above and beyond the quote-unquote nutritional requirements to subvert, i.e. undercut the development of these chronic diseases. And that is actually why EverPup is coming to market for that exact reason.
So what do you supplement them with? Just fresh vegetables?
One, EverPup, when it's available, and it'll be there in about a month, because it's a very, very specifically designed supplement to address that very question. If you'd like to do vegetables, that's absolutely fine. So what you're going to be focusing on is your colored greens, your colored veggies. Are going to be your brassicas, as cabbage, Brussels sprouts. We cooked them, we pureed them, cooked them at low temperatures and pureed them, and you add them to the dog's food in conjunction usually with lean meats. Of course, you want your omega-3s that we mentioned, and also, of course, we want to make sure that we have immune stimulants in there, which can be derived from things like certain mushrooms and yeast and oat bran and stuff like that. So I can talk to you more about that after the talk. Yeah.
Doctor, I asked you earlier, and what I'm asking you now was about flea and tick prevention that doesn't poison the bugs.
Right, and there's a story associated with that, in that you had an experience with one of the common tick products, and shortly thereafter your dog developed fatal liver disease, as I understand it. So the question had to do with safety and flea and tick use. Whenever we do any intervention, one of the things that we perhaps have not done as good a job of is at educating people on possible side effects, including what they call idiosyncratic reactions. An idiosyncratic reaction is an allergic reaction that has gone nuclear, and it happens very, very rarely. Pesticides that we use to kill things like fleas and ticks in pets occasionally will develop a reaction, either an allergic reaction, which is irritation around where you put it on, red, inflamed, burning type of thing. You can also have occasionally what's called anaphylaxis, which is a full body allergic reaction where you puff up and get hives and they vomit and stagger, have a hard time breathing, and that's life-threatening. And every once in a while, you will get what's called an idiosyncratic reaction involving an organ like the liver or sometimes the bone marrow. This is very rare. And we're talking usually 1 in 10,000 type of statistics, but when it's happening to you, it doesn't matter. For you, it's 100%, not 1 in 10,000, right? And every once in a while, using not only things like topical flea and tick control, but even antibiotics or anti-inflammatories, things like that, we'll see this not only in pets, but also in people. Bone marrow issues, liver issues, embryotoxicity. Remember thalidomide, the nausea medication where the babies came out with flippers from pregnant moms, the little finger mutations and stuff. These things occasionally happen, and so that's why right now I believe the future in managing these chronic diseases is going to be looking towards the quote-unquote more natural nutraceutical compounds, because the side effects that we're seeing are lower, and we can use them in combinations. It's called multimodal therapy, so they use small amounts of a bunch of different things all together, so you don't get the side effects, but you get the additive benefit. And the question is, what's safe? What's safe for fleas and ticks? Nothing is absolutely 100% safe. However, the very, very safest thing that you can do truthfully is simply use your fingers and a flea comb and remove them every day, looking, of course, at the spaces between the digits, the toes and fingers, and the ears, armpits, and don't forget the ocole, which is a favorite spot for ticks, not a favorite spot for people to go snooping around in, though. Sorry.
So there's no other treatment besides?
Yeah, if you want to go herbal, some of the things like the clove oil substances and the clove oil, eucalyptus oil, a lot. You know what's odd, everybody? And the reason why I say nothing is 100% safe, everything just has actions, and then it also has effects. And some of those effects can be positive or negative. If you look at plants, plants have insecticides and pesticides in them. And as a matter of, because they have to defend against what? Biting insects, different from fleas and ticks. What we see is 40% of those substances in plants, when extracted and used in the amounts that we would use things like topical flea and tick products, 40% of them are carcinogenic. So it's funny when you start looking at this from really in depth, because plants are making carcinogens. It doesn't seem to make much sense, but it's actually true. Yes?
I'm curious about, in terms of flea and tick treatment as well as good digestion, a homeopath told me putting garlic into their food and cilantro as well would help with GI health, but then the garlic would also help keep away fleas and ticks. Is that true?
Yeah. So the question had to do with garlic for digestion and also for keeping away blood-sucking pests in your pet. Here in Hawaii, I have had a lot of people try this with their pets, and the truth of it is, it doesn't seem to work very effectively. It helps a little bit. It does help a little bit, but the ticks in particular out here, now the fleas, they're so violently aggressive that they seem to be able to withstand the repellent effects of dietary garlic. I mean, garlic and cilantro. Garlic and cilantro is garlic in particular are very interesting. There are these allyl sulfides compounds in there, antimicrobial, they kill germs, they have anti-inflammatory effects, there's some mild anti-cancer effects. Pretty neat stuff, garlic. But if you want to get the benefits of garlic, you want to make sure that it's not heat processed. You got to use the garlic that's not cooked at high temperatures, because those allyl sulfides all break down and you'll just be given powder. Do we have time for more questions?
Yeah.
Other questions? Yes.
I was curious about dogs that have the ability to detect disease.
Oh yeah, so the question had to do with what about dogs that have the ability to detect disease? And there's a lot of really interesting press going on right now, and many of my clients actually have had personal experience with this. Did you have a comment?
My daughter had an experience, and she was feeling quite badly, and her stomach was bothering her, and the doctor was kind of poo-pooing her. So anyway, one night she was sitting on the sofa, and they have a huge, big Anatolian Shepherd dog. And the dog got up on the sofa in a cat-like position, laid her head against Eddie's chest, and it stayed there for a long time. It was really weird. My granddaughter thinks she's kind of psychic with animals, so when my daughter and her daughter were talking, she said, I think you should go and check that out. The dog's trying to tell you something. So she went and had a body scan, and sure enough, she had a tumor in her lung and was able to have a stage 1 tumor from her lung removed.
Wow. Yeah. So cancer.
Anything she wants.
Yeah.
That was pretty amazing.
So the story, for those of you, if you couldn't hear it, sorry, we only have one microphone, but the story had to do with the dog. I started acting differently and climbed up on her chest and effectively communicated there was something wrong. And so she got this issue checked out and had stage 1 pulmonary cancer of some kind, lung cancer. So yeah, absolutely, they can. This has been documented. When you take, say for example, cancer detection, when you take cancer cells, doggies are over 90% able to differentiate cancerous cells from non-cancerous cells in a test tube. That's been studied. And in terms of just straight up cancer detection in the body, where the dogs are trained to sniff the cancer, they're about 40% accurate. So they're not as good as doing what you're talking about, but I think probably a lot of it has to do with, number 1, the training. Number 2, I highly suspect that different cancers have different smells and different sort of pheromonal physiological changes. So I believe that they're much more able to do that than we give them credit for. But the way that a study is set up, you have to train the dog to detect certain things, and if you don't quite know what you're training them to detect, the accuracy will go down. But yeah, pets being sentinels for disease. I a client came in one time and the dog had a St. Christopher jeweled medallion on his neck with a gold chain, and I said, "Wow, this is beautiful. You know, this St. Christopher medallion." And he says, "Yeah, well, that dog saved my life." And what happened was he had I think he had a cardiac arrest, and without training the dog, this little doggy went up and grabbed the telephone, brought it to him so that he could dial 911. And so they many times have an awareness that perhaps we don't give them credit for, especially under those extreme circumstances. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I just heard something the other day about black pepper, which is one of the essential ingredients in black pepper, having something to do with metabolism and fat, controlling obesity. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah. Piperazine. So black pepper is really interesting because there are physiologic changes that when you start looking at and the weird thing is it's mostly spices. Spices have like all of these crazy physical properties when the active ingredients are extracted in high concentrations, including black pepper. Black pepper has piperazine in it, which will serve to help glucose levels and fat regulation. The scary thing about it, though, is it inhibits certain enzymes in the body. There are certain cytochromes. These enzymes break down things, including drugs, including pharmaceutical drugs. And so it can be used to raise blood levels of certain drugs. But you got to be careful because, remember, the black pepper shuts down some of the enzymes that are responsible for breaking down a drug. Therefore, if you take a pill that has a certain milligram strength, you could end up with a lot more in your body than was anticipated. So you got to be cautious when you're using that stuff. Not pepper in your food, but if you're looking to take like a black pepper supplement, keep this in mind because the cytochrome that's inhibited can impact certain pharmaceutical blood levels and get you in a little bit of trouble actually sometimes. Any other questions? Okay, very good. Well, thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed it.